All right. So if you're joining our webinar series for the first time, this Maryland Rebooted series is a part of the University of Maryland's efforts to help aid the recovery of small and medium-sized businesses in Maryland who have been affected by COVID. So we've been so far having a really successful series on the topics of strategy and accounting, as well as some really excellent panel discussions. And today we'll be starting our three-part series on the topic of marketing. And today I'm really happy to introduce Professor Mary Harms, who will be leading this three-part series on marketing. So to give you some sense of who Mary is, Mary Harms has been teaching digital marketing consecutively since 1998. Her class was one of the first undergraduate digital marketing classes offered in the US. Mary came to the Smith School in 2001, coming from Iowa State University, where she was teaching and also served the business school's first marketing and alumni director. Her focus in teaching besides digital marketing is strategy and design in business. She's also the co-founder of the Strategic Design Fellows Program, a select program for design and marketing students within the Smith School of Business. She's also an entrepreneur, for 25 years, and has been an SBDC consultant. So I'm really happy to have Mary here with us today, and I'm sure we'll learn a lot. My name is Nicole Kim, and I'm a coordinator for the Maryland Business Rebooted program. I'll today help moderate any questions that you may have for Mary today. So we ask you to stay muted throughout the lecture, but we welcome any questions that you might have. So please use either the Q&A section or the chat section to submit your questions at any time, and I'll be happy to deliver your questions to Mary. All right, so without further ado, I'll hand over the floor to Mary.
Okay, thank you, Nicole. Yes, as Nicole said, I was an entrepreneur and for 25 years. And so I really empathize with all of you. And that's one of the reasons why I enthusiastically agreed to present this webinar. During my time as an entrepreneur, I survived a recession or two. I survived a flood that wiped out our tourism business for a season. And I unfortunately lost my business partner to cancer, who was also my husband and my children's father. So I kind of understand what you're going through right now. And I applaud you for attending this presentation and all the others from Maryland Business Rebooted, okay? So I hope you've got your cup of coffee. You do? Okay, great, let's get started. So we're going to start today by looking at grocery stores, and you're saying, well, gee, I thought this was about digital marketing. Well, it is, but I think there's a lot that we can learn by our experiences going to grocery stores. You know, think about, well, let's look at the next slide and maybe this might help you. When you go to the grocery store, you've got a list oftentimes, but you have a definite reason for going there. And you want to get in and you want to get out quickly, right? Because you've got other things to do. You oftentimes find that that experience might not be quite as pleasant as you had hoped for. Here you see the gentleman finding what he needs, he reads the information, but here you see a crowded aisle, etc. And so I want you to think of visitors coming to your site as if they were coming to the grocery store, okay? And are you making it easy for them to find what they're looking for? Are you giving them the information that they need? Are you making it a pleasant experience? So I tried this out with my husband, and who is an independent business person. And I showed him this slide and he goes, no way, grocery stores don't guide us through the store. I just go wherever I want. And I said, wait a minute, you don't realize it, but yes, grocery stores do guide you through that store. When you think of all the merchandise that's there and the aisles that you need to go through, they want to make sure that you see the entire store, do they not? So what they do is they've created a ring of perishables. So when you walk in, typically what you see is the produce, right? And they know that produce is often the product category that you use to decide which grocery store you go to. So that's what you see first. And then you wander back here and you've got your meat and your eggs, and then over here, your dairy, okay? And they've gotten you through the entire store. This is the ring of perishables. And because the fact that they're perishable, you're going to be coming back to the store often. Okay, the webmaster does the same thing through navigation, through active white space, the graphics that we use, the images that we use, the text. We're all guiding our visitors through our site. And what about the checkout experience, right? Okay, now I have a tendency to be in this line more than this line, but I think you can see right here, this gentleman is looking at his watch. And so are the visitors to your site. And in fact, I'm going to say this over and over again. When people come to a website, they don't necessarily come to read, they come to skim. They skim, they find what they're looking for, and they leave, okay? So what we want to do is create the most positive customer experience for our site visitors. And that's accomplished through UX, UI, user experience and user interface. Now I'm just going to show you an illustration. This site being the user experience and UI. But understand that we're going to be looking at just about all of these today. I love this quote by Steve Jobs, founder of Apple. People think design is veneer, that the designers are handed this box and told, make it look good. That's not what we think design is. It's not just what it looks like and feels like. Design is how it works. And so today I am going to focus on design because I want you to understand how it affects your visitors' experience to your site, okay? Now really, none of us wants our site visitors to feel like this when they're using our site. And yet I can be honest, there have been some sites I've been to that I felt exactly like this. In fact, 95% of users indicate that a positive user experience is the most important factor when they visit a website. Now, why has the user experience gotten to be such a major determinant of our site satisfaction? And that's because now just about every business has a site. And so if you're not pleased with what you're seeing or how you're using this site, you can go to a competitor. You don't have to get in your car, drive to the competitor. All you do is make 1 or 2 clicks and you're there. So that's why we really need to look at user experience. Now, companies have made it really quite easy for us to create our own websites, have they not? And hopefully many of you have created your own sites by using, here are just some of the platforms: Squarespace, Wix, Weebly, GoDaddy, and WordPress. They've basically taken the work out. They have created the cascading style sheets and the wireframes and the sitemaps. All you need to do is find your images and your content. And you can do some customization to these. The only problem is that sometimes by using these themes and templates that they've created, your site starts to become homogenized. And so that's what I'm going to talk about today, how you can really infuse your brand personality into your websites. Okay, so let's get started. We're going to look at website versus social media, who's coming to your site and why, the must-haves for your homepage, branding through design, and then branding through content and SEO. So just to preface today, I we're going to look at 5 different sites. And these sites I found by doing a Google search for restaurants and hair salons and builders in Denver, Colorado. Okay? Never been to any of these sites or to the actual businesses. But I feel like after I've looked at these particular websites, I really do understand their brand. Okay? So first of all, I hear often, do I really need a website anymore? I've got social media. I've got my Facebook page. You know, it's just too much. I really encourage you to think instead of either or, to think and. And that's why today we're going to look at websites as we will in 2 weeks. And then the last webinar is about social media. You should really think of them in tandem, okay? So with that, you want some consistency. And I do see that here. We'll come back to La Loma in just a few moments. But next of all, I'd like us to think about who's coming to my site, okay? So I'm going back to the fact that my husband has his own business, and I was showing him some of these slides, and he's in the process of revising his website. And so I sat down with him and we went through who's coming to my site in the next few slides. Guess what he did? He totally revised his site because he realized he hadn't really spent enough time taking into consideration who was coming to a site. So look at your analytics if you already have a site, and that will help you better understand who's coming to your site. You also may want to do some market research on your own, and it doesn't have to be expensive market research, okay? But you want to understand your target audiences. And remember, you'll have first-time visitors and returning visitors, and they have different needs and wants. And so you need to build the website for both. So once you've done some market research, looked at your analytics if they're available, you've got an idea of who's coming to your site. So then you can create personas. Personas are often used in marketing. What you do is you create personas of individuals using real characteristics, but what you've got is a composite of an individual. So there's no real Mark's age 22 that looks like that walking around, okay? But his demographics, as you see here, and his behavioral identifiers will definitely describe a particular target market coming to your site, as will Justin, 31, and Maggie, who's 52, okay? So what we see here is typically once you build these personas, you put a face on them, you give them a name, and then you refer to them as you build your site. Like, well, I wonder what Justin wants in our site. Have we covered everything that Mark's looking for when he's coming to our site? So personas can be very helpful. They encourage you to be empathetic, to think about your customer base when you build your site. There's another approach to personas, and that would be an empathy map. Now, once again, think about that individuals coming to your site. Think about the tasks that they're trying to complete. And what questions do they have that really need to be answered? Once again, look at their feelings. How are they feeling about this experience? Are they enjoying it, or is it just torture for them? What really does matter to them? Price, quality, selection, uniqueness? What are the pain points that they might be feeling that they're expecting your business, your products, your services to help them either reduce or totally eliminate? What is their ultimate goal? And what are they trying to achieve? And last of all, influences. Now, when I talk about B2B in a couple of weeks, those of you who are involved in B2B know that typically the decisions are made by committee or by a couple of individuals. That's not necessarily the case in personal purchasing, consumer purchasing. You may have some influences. I mean, we all know there are social influencers out there that can be as influential, if not more, than parents or siblings or friends. So once again, understand who might be influencing them.
Mary?
Yes.
So we do have a question from Teresa, and I think it's really interesting. So in your previous slide, you talked about how feeling can be really relevant. And so the question is, how do you know how a person is feeling when they visit your website?
Good question. I think some of that is difficult. I do think one way of measuring how they're feeling about the experience is by how long they spend on each page. And if they come back to your site. So that gives you an idea of how invested they are in the experience. Okay. I'd also we've talked about personas and we've talked about empathy maps. And once again, market research can help you better understand those feelings, okay, about the consumer decision process. The customer journey map has gotten a lot of, it's very popular right now in marketing. And what it allows you to do is to follow your customers. And once again, you could go back to several different target audiences because each customer journey map is going to be a little bit different. And what you want to do is to outline the stages that they take in the consumer decision process, from awareness to consideration of the alternatives, to a decision, to delivery and use, and then afterwards, the post-purchase, okay? And during that time, think about the last time you made a purchase, especially a high involvement purchase that maybe had a lot of alternatives, that was expensive. You really went through various stages. And with those stages, there were different activities, as you see here. And that's what you want to do with your customer journey map. Outline what are their activities? What are their goals? Now, maybe at the beginning, when they're in the awareness stage, they don't really have any goals. But those goals will mature and change as they go through the process. The touch points. You know, I'm sure probably all of us have found out about a brand on social media, okay? Wasn't even thinking about if we needed that product or that brand, but once we did, that was a touch point, okay? Or maybe it was a friend who happened to mention a brand that she had recently purchased, okay? From there, we look at the experience. How would you rate the experience that you are offering your customer now? Look at your website, okay? Look at the other brand touch points and how is that experience changing, okay? You can go on to Google and you can do Starbucks customer journey map. And it's fascinating to see how they have carefully figured out what individuals are thinking and feeling as they go through the process of buying their pumpkin spice latte. So once again, here we have your business goal. yes, you need to figure out what you need to do as a goal, the KPI, key performance index, how are you going to measure it? And then your organizational activities and who's responsible, okay? So you would do that for each one of these stages, and then that will once again help you create a website that delivers on what your individuals want. So remember, your research does not have to be large scale. Just get out there and talk to your potential customers, okay?
Oh, Mary?
Yes.
Before moving on, I just wanted to kind of deliver this question by Hassan. And I think he's asking about kind of thinking about the persona that you were mentioning, your customers targeting, whether you should base your persona more on like a kind of wider industry level, or should you kind of more go a little bit deeper and kind of target different individuals?
I think you need to look at why they're coming to your site, okay? For instance, going back to my husband's business, like I said, he's a consultant. So sometimes companies will go to his website because they want to learn more about him to hire him, okay? There are others who are purchasing, or I'm sorry, who are looking for information for their clients, okay? And so basically we were looking at 3 different target audiences, and a lot of it deals, especially when you're looking at B2B, why they're coming to that site, okay? Does that help? Okay. And I think once again, if it's B2C, you can look at different age groups, different ethnicities, different genders. If it's a restaurant, you can look at, is it someone who's coming for on a routine basis, or is it someone that's totally new and just moved to that particular area? Is it a tourist? Okay. Is it someone who really is coming to your restaurant because they want to make it a very special occasion? Does that help? Hope so. Okay, so we're going to look at the homepage. Now, I want you to think of the homepage as the store window. And you're strolling along, you're looking at a store window, you're looking at the merchandise inside. Maybe you're actually looking into the store. Is it crowded? Are those the price points that I want to pay? Is it the merchandise selection what I really want? And if it is, it encourages you to go into that store, does it not? Well, that's what the homepage should be about. It should encourage you to have a basic understanding of what they have to offer and go in, okay? So with that, let's look at why I chose this particular homepage. This is for a builder in Denver. Once again, I've never met them. Why do I like this site? First of all, they've used a photograph, okay? And they've I believe, toned it down with a gray. So it's darker, you can still see it, okay? Very clear resolution. But by being darker, then they can put text over it, and that text just pops, does it not? It's very easy to read. And look at their logo. That orange, and then they include the home page link, also in orange, okay? So you see that logo, you see their brand promise, think long term. You see their value proposition, what they can offer their customers, that they create a positive, lasting impact on the lives of the people we work with and the places we build. Now, service builders are services, right? And services are intangible. It's not like going to a store and trying on a coat. It's intangible. So when we are thinking of purchasing services, we look for evidence. As I tell my students, you want to manage the evidence. So what they've done here is, I know for a builder, I'd like to know that I can trust them. And in fact, your whole homepage should be really conveying trust in your brand. So what we see here is crests of two associations that they belong to. Their navigation is very clean. They have 7 tabs that you can choose from. No more. Studies have shown, as far as consumer behavior is concerned, we can handle 7. Like, think of phone numbers. You've got the area code and 7 digits. If you look at your automobile plates, 7 digits or letters, okay? So keep it 7 or under. Something else I really like here is the fact that they've included their phone number and their physical address. It's up there, it's easy to find. It's not intrusive at all in their overall design. Now, also want to mention that they used a sans serif font. I'm not assuming that you all know what that is, and I will show you examples of it later. But we see that it's used most often on the web because it's so easy to read. Now, putting text on top of a photo or a dark background with white text, we refer to that as reverse text. And you really want to make sure that your text is large enough and maybe even bolded so that it can easily be read. Okay, one more term before we leave.
Oh, Mary?
Yes.
Sorry if I might interrupt. So we do have a question kind of a little bit more practical, and I think your website here is a really great example. But Steve is asking if you were to take on this kind of designing your website yourself, what kind of differences would you say there are between the different sort of website creating tools or the websites that you outlined a few slides before? Would you suggest one is better than the other? And also, if you weren't doing it yourself and kind of using an external source, is there like a particular way that you would recommend which person to go to or kind of where to look at?
Mm-hmm. I knew somebody was going to ask me that.
Mm-hmm.
And so personally, I have used Wix a lot. WordPress has been around for a long, long time, as has GoDaddy. Squarespace is probably one of the newest. Now, I teach this course. Another faculty member teaches it the other semester. He always uses Weebly, okay? To be quite honest, once you learn one, then the others are pretty easy to learn, okay? So what I suggest to my students, because every semester I have 120 to 150 students create personal websites that I grade, okay? And so I typically encourage them to look at several and then look at how easy they appear, look at the tutorials that they offer. I think that can be a really good way to see. Look at the templates and the themes that they offer. But really what's happened is because so many of us are trying to build our own website, that each one of them has become more sophisticated and easier to use, okay? So once again, I tend to use Wix. I think over the years, they have definitely kept up with the trends, but so have the others. If you decide that you're going to use someone else, a couple of things I would do. I would talk to my friends. I would talk to other business owners. Find out who they've used. And then I would go on to those sites and I would look at their portfolios, because I think that will give you a really good understanding of what they perhaps specialize in. Uh, you know, yeah, I really do think portfolios, testimonials, but once again, I think it's a combination of talking to other business people, friends, and then looking on their own site, okay? Okay, one other question, or one other term I'm going to throw out at you, and I'm not sure how many of you have ever heard this term. It's called false bottom. That's right, false bottom. Now this site does not have a false bottom, this homepage. And what do I mean by that? Well, the early websites were actually web pages. And a website was just one page and you would scroll forever. And then we came to realize that, you know what, having these, the navigation that you can click on and go to other pages really was quite nice. What's happened in the last few years is because of the fact that so many of us are accessing the internet on our smartphones, okay, is that we've come to see more scrolling home pages. Now, with that, this is a scrolling home page. And what they've done is you can see just a little text and just a little of an image. And that's saying to me, you need to keep scrolling. There's more information down here, okay? So that's really, really important. When you look at your homepage, there's another term I want you to really be familiar with, and that is above the fold. So that comes from the journalism field, and editors will spend a lot of time figuring out what stories and what photos go above the fold, because that's what sells newspapers. The magazine, sometimes, you know, magazines, they'll test different magazine covers, same content inside, but two different magazine covers to see which one sells better than others, okay? That would be their version of above the fold. Here, sorry, you need to see what's above the fold, what you really want your visitors to see and remember about your company needs to be above the fold of your homepage, okay? So sometimes you see home pages where you've got a hero image. This is a hero image, but you've got a hero image as a banner. It comes all the way down here and then they start. This happens all the time with my students. And I go, no, 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 no. You're making them scroll too much to find the information that they're looking for, okay? So once again, that goes back to the fact that we're all busy or think we're busy and we want to skim. So this next page, a slide, I think will show it even better. Your homepage should communicate these important factors in 30 seconds. That's basically all the time they want to give to you. A home page is not a page where there should be a lot of text. They're not going to read it. It's a navigational page. So once again, this is what you want to communicate. What site the users have arrived at. Got the logo there, they know it. What benefits the organization offers them. The value proposition and or the brand promise. Something about the company, its products or new developments, right here. And then their users' choices and how to get to the most relevant section, and that's up here, okay? So this came from Prioritizing Web Usability by Jakob Nielsen, who was one of the pioneers of website usability. He's written several books about it. So I really encourage you to maybe look at picking it up, okay? So we're going to look at branding through design. And I think I mentioned this before, but 48% of people consider a website's design to be the most telling factor about the credibility of a business. And 94% of visitors leave a website and stop trusting it because of a degraded or poor web design. So, yes, content is very critical, but so is design. What we're going to do now is look at 3 different homepages and websites. So we all get our hair cut, don't we? Or at least we did up until maybe 6 months ago. We will again. So what I did was I typed in hair salons and in Denver, Colorado, and these came up. They were in basically, I think, the top 5 or 10. But what I liked about them is they were so different, and they really each have their own brand personality. So we're going to start with Bad Kitty Salon, okay? Now, every web page needs a focal point, especially that home page, okay? And Bad Kitty Salon's homepage is this photo, the photo of the outside. And it really does help kind of give you an idea of what you might expect. Wouldn't you agree? It also gives you the location and the hours. So really good for individuals who are wanting to make an appointment. And speaking of making an appointment, they make it really easy right here. And I love how they have tied in the color of their banner background, that hot pink, with one of the buttons here. You also see here their links to social media, and that would be Facebook, I can't read, oh, and Instagram, right? That we refer to as social proof. So if you're looking at the website, but maybe you want feedback from someone else, you would look at their social media and see what other people are saying. It's amazing how much we rely on the wisdom of crowds, right? Individuals we've never met. Remember that false bottom? Well, here they have our customers continually trust us as one of the best hair salons in Denver. Read through some of our Yelp reviews below. I'll be kind of honest. I looked at this website so many times and didn't see that until much later. So I think that it's really important for you to think about how you can encourage them to scroll. Now, one other point I want to make about this particular website is that we have, as you can see here, this is a static design. And this you still see, but there's really some wasted space here. So it encourages you to scroll. Let's look at the interior pages. And I wanted to point this out. FAQ pages. Yes, they're really customer service for your website. And this particular site does not have a search function. And so they rely on FAQs. And even sites that have a search function use FAQs. So here, what I want you to see is that you can here's the, like here's the question. I click on the question and the answer comes right up. Perfect, okay? The only thing is just because it's a FAQ doesn't mean that it has to be written as a question. What you might want to do is use phrases. It makes it much easier to skim, okay? Once again, here's their salon services and their stylists. And just by looking at how she's dressed and how it's written, once again, you get an idea of their brand personality. Okay, the next one we're going to look at is Clementine's. Clementine's Salon. Beautiful photograph, wouldn't you say? Once again, a hero image. They don't have a false bottom. You can see here, mission, who we are, so that encourages you to scroll. I'll come back to this in just a moment. Their brand promise is good, but it's hard to read. Remember I talked about that reverse text? They've used sans serif. That's good. But this is a little too small and it should be bold in order to read it, as is their navigation. Okay. Their logo, a really nice looking logo, but unfortunately it blends in with the background. And that's really critical. Typically, your logo should be on the upper left-hand corner, and it should appear on all of your pages. And it should actually be a link, a hyperlink to your home page. So you can go to any of these pages, and on that page, you will see the logo, and you can just click on it and know it's going to take you back to the home page, okay?
Mary?
Yes.
Yeah, so we had some questions regarding some of the jargon that you used.
Okay.
And we can kind of go over some of those.
Uh-huh.
People were asking things like, so for example, what is a hero image? What is like a false bottom? Things like that.
Okay, okay. So a hero image is a large image or photo that takes up nearly all of the page, okay? Good question. A false bottom would be if all I could see when I went onto the home page ended right here, okay? And I would assume that there's no reason to scroll. And it's so important to keep, I mean, here's their mission statement, okay? And if the homepage ended right here and I couldn't see what was down here when I first clicked on it on the homepage, I would totally miss this information. And this has really become critical because when you go to Wix or Weebly or any of those, they often show a scrolling homepage because we scroll when we're on our smartphones, okay? So here, when I went on to her Clementine's homepage, I could see that there was something more down here I wanted to look at, and I could see these. This says match with a stylist button. There's another button, I think it's for booking. Yeah, book now. And then their contact information. Okay, and look at the contact information. It is in, you can either email them or phone them, and notice that it's in a color that stands out. Okay. So while I think this is a beautiful site, this homepage, the match with the stylist is amazing. Okay, let's go see. But before we do that, I want to show you when you scroll down, just so you have a better idea. This is the other half, the bottom half of the homepage. There's their mission statement, which is sometimes used instead of their value proposition. But once again, we see what their mission is: to foster and maintain genuine and lasting relationships with our clients, enduring satisfaction with each visit. Okay. They've also included a photo of the inside of their salon. And you know what? I really like that, because when I get my hair done, that's where I spend my time, is inside the salon. So I really liked being able to see the ambiance. So once again, this is, I think their homepage would have stopped right about here. So you could see this, okay? So the match with a stylist is probably for the first time visitor. And let me show you this page more thoroughly. Okay, have you ever moved somewhere and you had to find a new stylist? Now, that ranks up there sometimes with a new doctor, new dentist, your hairstylist, okay? And I can remember vividly, this happened so many years ago, I'm not going to tell you. But I had just moved to Madison, Wisconsin, and I daily would drive by this little salon. And I thought, I went and I looked in, when I went and got my groceries, I looked into the salon. I go, wow, I think this is where I want to go. I think they can help me. So I went to the salon on a Saturday afternoon. And unfortunately, I got a stylist who had just graduated from hairstyling school. And I have very fine, thin hair. I know that. I've known that forever. But about halfway through my experience, my stylist said, you have really difficult hair. Yeah, I know. She goes, I don't know what to do with it. Okay. And I walked out about 45 minutes later with a bad haircut and style, feeling super bad about myself, and even worse about the salon. And for 2 more years, I drove by that salon every day, never went back. Why? Because I hadn't had the right stylist. So when I call a hairstyling salon now, the first thing I say is, give me a stylist who understands thin and fine hair, okay? So look at here and think about, how could this be applied to your business? If you're in the service business, okay, and you have some service providers, maybe you can incorporate some of this into your website. So let's find your perfect stylist. Boy, does that make me feel comfortable. Start here. And as you can see, what services would you like to receive? Your hair type is best described as. How would you describe your personal style? When you're at the salon, what do you care about? And it goes on. How do you spend your free time? Et cetera, et cetera. And then at the end, you click. And then they will give you who your stylist will be, okay? Now, here, then you can go to the stylist photos, and there were many. There was a gallery. I just clicked on this one, and as you can see, here's her bio, and you can see, where she's from, where she studied, some of her philosophy, what her prices are. So I have a pretty good understanding that when I walk in there for the first time, I feel much more comfortable with who I'm getting as a stylist, okay? So I told you, I think this site has a lot to offer. Once again, we've got the logo still, I think it needs to be larger. The lines need to be a little bit thicker so that you can easily find it, and it really is promoting your brand. But it's there, which is good. Now remember the FAQs with the first salon, okay? And you had to read all the questions. From here, what they've done for most of them is use a phrase. Cancellation policy. Okay, easy. Dermaplane, weddings. So it's pretty easy to skim and find what you're looking for then with the answer, okay? Now, this page, it's smaller here, but it is a page full of text, and we all have them, okay? So what do you do to make them easy to read? You don't want to build a wall of text, okay? Instead, and here's another term I'm going to throw at you, but I think it's a fun term to say, so I say it often. You want to chunk the text. And my students always remember it, I think, because they think it's fun too, to say, chunk the text. And what I mean by that is, when you have a lot of text on a page, you need to make sure that the lines of text are short, and they should be only 3 to 5 inches. Now this is really sort of max, maybe a little more on this page. What they do have is, it looks like double spacing or letting, extra space in here, which makes it easier to read, okay? But let me say once again, your lines of text should be 3 to 5 inches and no longer. Well, why is that? Well, think about, we've grown up reading lines of text in books, in magazines, newspapers, 3 inches at the most 5, okay? Beyond that, if you go from one end to the other, by the time you come back to the second line or third line, and definitely the fourth line, let's see, now which one was it? Okay, it takes too much time. So chunk the text. Your paragraph should be no more than 8 to 10 lines, and they can even be shorter. In fact, on the internet, a paragraph can be 1 sentence, okay? And notice too how they have these subheadings using bold text, very easy to skim. And once again, their chat. So they really have put their customer front and center for just about this entire site. Okay, let's move on to site number 3. Totally different feeling, is it not? That black and white makes it sort of edgy and sophisticated. Now, the reason why I included this homepage is because this is an example of a path-based homepage, that you might want to use if you have multiple locations, okay? So what they've done is, this is sort of the umbrella, and then there are 3 different tabs that you can click on that would take you to either the Broadway, the Rhino, or the Denver Technical Center. So I clicked on Broadway, and this is where I came to. Now, once again, I like the fact that they're showing you the interior, okay? And it really, doesn't it, it's so consistent with the overall look of their site, okay? Make it very easy, book appointment, reopen guidelines, okay, the location. You've got their logo up here, that's good. Their mission statement, that's very good. I guess I'm surprised that this mission statement wasn't on the homepage, the path-based homepage. I think that would have been nice to have read that, because I would assume that it was the same for each one. And you can also see just a little bit of the stylus, so you know to scroll, which I did. And I saw these individuals, and then I clicked on one, and this is what pops up, okay? So this would be the bio. So once again, I just really wanted you to look at these 3 different sites, and hopefully you see 3 very different brand personalities that were conveyed through the design. I'd like to talk just a little bit about color, okay? Now, I think probably for some of you, that hot pink on the first one was maybe a little jarring, okay? I definitely liked it, but understand that color can evoke reactions that are very different from one person to the next. And a lot of that has to do with our culture, our prior association with that color, just our personal preferences. It's amazing. My daughter has triplets. One loves green, one loves blue, and the other yellow, and it matches their personalities, okay? Research reveals that all human beings make an unconscious judgment about a person, an environment, or an item within 90 seconds of initial viewing, and that between 62% and 90% of that is based on color alone, okay? So choose your color schemes carefully. In order to help you with that, what I've done here is included some word maps that really address the emotional qualities of colors. And you can find more at this particular site. Red. Red is an aggressive color. It can overwhelm. It can take up the room. It's very powerful. So, but it can also be very sensual. So think about how you want to use it on your site, okay? Blue, well, blue is the universally most liked color globally. It also instills trust. And so typically, if you look at a bank logo, insurance logo, law firm, it's typically blue with maybe an addition of another color, okay? Then we see green, and green has gained a lot in popularity in the last several years. And you know, it's just restful. We look at the environment. It can signal progress, being vegetarian, okay? So once again, there are many more at this particular page or website. What I do want you to understand is you should use no more than 4 different colors on your website. 4 different colors, okay? You can use shades, and I'm sorry, I've got this little fly flying around me. Okay, so you've got shades and tones that you might want to use, and tints, make it lighter or darker, but only 3 or 4 colors, okay? And you also want to make sure that there's a contrast between your text and your background. And don't forget, 8 to 10% of males are colorblind, and 0.5% of women are colorblind. So that's important. Some of these principles that I'm telling you today are critical for ADA, okay? So American Disabilities Act. You want to make sure, especially if you are designing a site or if your customer base is the government, that you are following ADA standards. And you can go to their website and they will list them all, okay? Green type colorblindness is the most common. So when you have a link embedded in your text, it's typically blue, right? Because blue colorblindness is very rare. If it were green, understand that probably 8 to 10% of males viewing your site may totally miss that link, okay? Okay, I promised I'd talk about typeface, and here we go. So I mentioned that in Clementine's salon, in MM, in the Builder, they all used a sans serif. What do I mean by that? Well, we grew up, you and I, probably reading text that was serif. Okay, newspapers still use it. Magazines still use it. Serifs are these right here, okay? But another characteristic of serif typefaces is that, as you can see here, this is thick, this is thin, this is thick, this is thin, this is thick. And so when you're putting serif typefaces over a dark background, some of that will start to disappear and make it very hard to read. Nonetheless, we still see serif typefaces used on websites. Once again, more traditional businesses, once again, law firms, banks oftentimes use serif, okay? And as long as you have a dark typeface or text on a white background, it's going to be easier to read. But if you're going to do that reverse text that I showed you earlier, if you are a tech firm, if you want to look really contemporary, you might want to look at sans serif, okay? So once again, think about your brand's personality. And here I listed, these are some of the most commonly used fonts on the web. These would be your sans serifs, and these would be your serifs. And these are spelled out in the actual font, so you can get an idea of what they look like. Okay. Remember that Mexican restaurant early on? Okay. So I went to their Our Story right up here, and I came to this page, and I nearly cried. Why? Because I could barely read it. They used a serif typeface. It's too small, and it's white on black, and white over a photograph of the founder or the grandmother, okay? So if she was that important, let's move her over here, okay? And either change the font, or if we've got her over here, let's put a white box here with black type and tell your story, okay? And don't forget that images are really better at communicating, and especially with mobile use and apps, and the fact that they are universally accepted, that sometimes maybe all you need is an image rather than text. And so I've just included here some sources for photos. And understand, I know we're all guilty of this. We go on to Google, we click images, we type in, and there's a plethora of images, right? But many of those, and oftentimes some of the best ones, are copyright protected. So one, I encourage you to get your smartphone out there and take photos. Our smartphones now are really exceptional as far as quality. But second of all, Creative Commons and Unsplash, I encourage you to go to both of these sites, and you will have photos that you can use. You can alter them. There are some, like with Creative Commons, you do have to attribute the sources, but it really is a great way to see some ideas and maybe take your own photos after you've seen these. So we're going to talk just a little bit more about images. Boy, she's spending a lot of time on that. And that is because, as you will hear later, our eyes are just drawn to those images. So here, as you can see, use crisp, descriptive photos. Yes, we have our smartphones, okay? And I know that many of you have had professional portraits taken, and you get so frustrated because they keep taking more and more and more photos. Why? Because they want just that perfect one, right? Well, now what we can do is take a photo with our smartphone, and if it's not quite perfect, we can almost make it perfect by cropping it, by changing the lighting. So I really do encourage, before you just start putting photos up on your website, take a few moments and make them look really good, because that reflects on your brand personality. And you'll save them, okay, as a file. And that file name should be descriptive so that the search engine has an idea of what the subject matter is for that image. You may also want to specify the width and the height of your images. And, you know, especially if you're doing social media, which we'll be talking about in, I think, 4 weeks from today, but they each have specific dimensions, okay, that they will allow you to use. But if you specify the width and the height of your images, then the web page can continue to download. And when that image is ready, it is dropped into that space that was saved for it, okay? Again, think above the fold. So if it's something that you really want them to see, make sure it is above the fold. And understand that search engines cannot read the text that you put on top of the image. So if you have some really important text on top of an image, you might want to make sure that it's in your HTML code, that it's somewhere else on that page, okay? So we're going to look at alt tags. Now, I'm sure some of you have never heard of alt tags, and that's perfectly okay. But the reason why I'm including them in this presentation is because if you want your images to show up in Google, then you need to write an alt tag for it, okay? It has become increasingly more important to optimize your photos. And that goes for not only your website, but also when you're going online. in mobile, okay? So basically what you want to think about is how you could describe that photo to someone over the phone and they could picture it in their mind. Now, you might just say, a stack of pancakes. Really? It could be a stack of pancakes with fresh blueberries on top and powdered sugar with maple syrup cascading over the sides. Okay. That helps me much more understand what that photo is. And if maybe it's on a page for a pancake mix company, you might want to insert the brand name into your alt tag. Now, understand that not everyone has perfect vision, and there are some people that have to rely on electronic readers to know what's on that page. And if you don't have an alt tag, that reader reads the text, comes to the image, and there's nothing there, and then goes on to the text, okay? One other aspect. There are parts of our country and definitely parts of the world where the bandwidth is not what we have here in Maryland. And with that, with the slower bandwidth, they may not even see the images. And so what you want to do is include that text to make it easier, okay? All right. So I wanted to show you, here is an alt tag for Doritos tortilla chips, okay? And this is in their HTML coding. Dorito tortilla chips, nacho cheese, 1.75 ounce large single serve bags, pack of 64, okay? So once again, every single photo on your website should have an alt tag, and Weebly, Wix, they all make it very easy to do that. Oftentimes when you insert the image, that box pops up and they say, what's your alt tag? Write your alt tag, okay? So it's never been easier. All right. Once again, just quickly, understand that because so many of us are accessing the internet on our mobiles, that you really need to think about, if you've got at least a majority, if not more than that, accessing your website on their smartphones, you may either want to create a dedicated mobile site, or two, use responsive design, which I will show you in the next slide, okay? But I highly recommend that you think about, what do you want them to see when they go onto your site on their phone? What aspects are most important? And this also serves for SEO, which I'll talk about later, search engine optimization. In that, Google expects your site to be mobile friendly. Okay, so this is what responsive design is all about. It's been around since 2012, 2013, when we started accessing the internet on mobile sites, on iPads or other tablets. And so basically it's on a fluid grid system that uses percentages. And so as you access the site on these various devices, it will alter the site, okay? And so some aspects of that page will fall away and maybe come down further on the page. Google has said that a site that takes longer than 3 seconds to load on a mobile site will rank higher, okay? So you really want to look at responsive design and your Weebly's, your Wix, they will all handle that for you. That's great, isn't it? Okay, so very quickly, I'm summarizing website design conventions. I think I've said all of these. Oh, a couple of things I didn't. Use lists. Look at that paragraph and go, does it need to be a paragraph? Could I change it into a list? 55% of users look at lists without bullets, and 70% look at lists with bullets. Okay? I think I've talked about everything else on this page. The grid format. Yes, we typically, and once again, this is where Weebly, Wix, Squarespace, they all have created these grid formats to help you so that it looks very neat and organized. I've mentioned everything else except justifying the text. Now, this text is left justified, and that is the easiest to read, especially when you have text blocks. I see this all the time, but try and avoid centering your text, if it's considerable text, on the internet. That's great for wedding announcements and baby showers, but it's not for the web. So be sure that you justify on the left-hand side, and the titles and the headings should be flush left too. Don't center them over the text, flush left, okay? All right, you're saying, okay, this is enough design. Let's talk a little bit about content. And that's what we're going to talk about in the remaining minutes of this presentation. How you can convey your brand personality through content. Now, you want to use your brand voice. What is your brand voice? Okay. And once again, it would depend on the type of business that you are. I'm first going to look at content, looking at it visually. And once again, you're saying, oh, she's spending so much time looking at images. Well, that's because as our attention spans have decreased, we find that photos, graphics have the power to stand out on our screens and capture our focus faster and more efficiently than text. So once something captures our attention, these visual forms of content can convey more information and emotion than text. Yeah, a picture is really worth 1,000 words. And we tend to remember photos more than text. It's been proven. Okay? And yes, I know. How mean am I showing you this beautiful picture of food at this point in time? I also want to show you some other photos from La Loma, that Mexican restaurant where we first started out. When you have a restaurant, a coffee shop, highly recommend that you show the interior. And I highly recommend that you show people in it. The last thing people want to see is a restaurant that's empty. Because I look at this and I can say, yeah, I'd fit in there. I'd like to spend time there, okay? So you're telling them quite a bit about your customer base, okay? You're also showing them your food. And this beautiful photo of the outside of the restaurant at night. This is another photo on their website. And why am I showing it to you? Because I think it really tells a story. I've never been to this Mexican restaurant, but you know what? It's when my son picks me up at the airport, whenever that will be, I want to go here. Look, it's cloudy. It's gray. They've got jackets on. It's not really a nice day out. And look at, they're waiting in line to get in. Yeah, does that tell you something about the restaurant? Combine that with pictures of the food, I'm set to go. Okay, we're going to look at a few other forms of visual content. Before and after photos. For those of you in the building trade, this would be wonderful. A hair salon, this would be wonderful. Cosmetics, you name it. What I liked here, we're back to our Sunnyside builders. They have a portfolio and they have all, and then they've broken it down into commercial, government, and residential. Once again, just make it easier to skim. How-to videos. It's never been easier to make a video. Okay. Demonstrations, infographics, portfolios of past projects. You may not have before photos, but this summer I was looking for a landscaper and I pored over portfolios of projects. I didn't really care what it looked like before. I just wanted to make sure that when they were done, it was going to be what I wanted. So here are some other pages on the builder site. I mentioned infographics, and there are several websites, Canva, C-A-N-V-A, easy to build infographics using that site. But they took the value proposition and turned it into an infographic. Makes it really easy to just, it pops out at you on the page. Their About Us page, which I'll talk about later, their services page, and then this page, Builder Trend Login. So what they've done is, if you are using them to build a house, a office building, whatever, they will give you access to videos so that you can see on a daily basis the progress that they're making. Talk about thinking of the customer. Perfect. So, going to use some more jargon, but I feel that it's important for you to understand information architecture. So what you want to do is think about what is the most important information and put it on the first page, the home page. And then think about the next areas of your website. What should go on the first page? What should go below the fold or due to another click? Okay, so that's a hierarchy. Now, one way that you might want to guarantee that you're really understanding your target audience is go back to those personas or that customer journey map and say, gee, have I included all the information for each one of those personas? Or have I included all the information that the individual would want as they move through the customer journey map? Okay. Now, what you might want to do, and you can do this digitally, or you can do it just on index cards, good old index cards, is divide up your information into little packets, put them on your index cards, and then give them to people, your family, your friends, etc., and say, would you mind sorting these into 5 or 6 piles for me? You know, put those that are similar in a pile. And then at the end, you say, would you mind writing a title, you know, labeling each one of those? Use one word, at the most 2. And what that does is that gives you your navigational buttons. So that makes the navigation of your information intuitive. Okay? So they know, so when they come, they have a good understanding that when they click on that button, it's going to give them the information that they want. All right. Yes. Nicole, did you have a question?
Yeah, sorry to interrupt you. I just wanted to let you know that we have around 4 minutes left, just to let you know.
Okay.
And also we have a couple of questions if you think we have time for those.
Can I just quickly run through? Okay, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead. I'll ask later then.
Okay, here are some other examples of written and audio content. On our About Us page, I really want to focus on that. Sometimes we as small business people, we don't want to brag. Well, don't think of your About Us page as bragging. Think about what you can tell the customer that will, with them in mind. This is an ideal place to show your personality, to differentiate yourself, okay? And once again, when you have time, go to Sunnyside Builders and read this about us, and you will want to use them as a builder for sure. Okay, when writing for the web, use 1/3 fewer words than if writing for print, and use an inverted pyramid. So the inverted pyramid comes from journalism once again, and the first time we think it was used was when President Lincoln was shot. And they started out the press release with President Lincoln has been assassinated. That was the most important information. And then from there, important details in your background information. Quickly use conversational tone, no jargon or acronyms. Sell your benefits, not your features. If you are creating a website for the general public, write for an 8th grade level. And there are websites that will help you judge your writing to see if you've done that. Remember that when they come in to your website, they are scanning, they're reading about 500 words at the most. They spend the remainder of their time looking at photos and scanning the bulleted lists and links to your other pages. What you want to do is create evergreen content, and that's content that doesn't have to be revised all the time, that you can put it on and maybe can be on your site for years. So I've given you some examples of that, how-to guides, progress reports. People love lists. So think about how you can, top 10 here, top 10 there. Why you want to produce the evergreen content is because it can help you with your search engine optimization, which I'll show you on the next page. Evergreen content is less work because you do it once and you don't have to do it again for some time. And you can actually cut it up into bite-sized portions and use it for your social media. And this tells you how to go about producing it. And I'd just like to end by talking a little bit about organic SEO. I don't have time to talk about it in full, but understand what the keywords are that people are coming to your site. What are they typing into the search engine? And then use those relevant keywords in your text, okay? More than 90% of the online experience starts with search engines. And so you don't have to pay for it. You just have to design your site well and include fresh, quality, in-depth content. And then this is the organic search results. These are the ads. This is the local SEO pack. But this is your organic search results. So this is what you want to provide as far as content, letting them know who you are, what you do, why you do it, show them how you do it, and what others think of you, how you're doing. These are some books that I have used over and over again as far as creating content. This book is iconic. It was written in 2005. It was rewritten in 2015. Just about every webmaster has it. I reviewed it again yesterday, and it's amazing how it has stood the test of time. So, in summary, build a customer-centric site. and encourage stickiness. And that means you want them to come to your site, stay for a long time, and come back again. Once again, thank you. And questions?
Great, thank you so much, Mary. So thanks for going through a little bit quickly, but we did have two questions, just a little bit quickly. So Hassan was asking about kind of going back to the persona piece. If you're targeting several different people, how would you suggest these websites do their copy and messaging?
Okay, understand that your homepage is for all of your personas. Your individual pages will appeal to just maybe one or two of your personas, okay? Understand that you will probably find that there are some common threads between your personas that will give you guidance as to how you would write your text. Okay?
Yeah. Okay, so Hassan, hopefully that answered your question. We did have another question, so I want to get to that. But you did mention a customer journey map in the very, very beginning of your slides.
Right.
Could you just expand a little bit more about how you might get that for your target audience?
Right. And this really, you can think about yourself. You can talk to your friends, family. What were they feeling or when they first discovered your product or your brand, okay? And what triggered them to consider, maybe it was a social media post. What triggered them to think about making that purchase? Excuse me. Then what were some questions that started going through their mind, all right? What risks were they feeling? And then they thought, well, gee, you know, I like that brand, but I'm going to see what else is out there. So they start doing more research, okay? And so they go on websites. And so then they have more questions and they need to answer those, okay? So you write those questions down. They're evaluating the alternatives. Think about the questions they might be asking themselves. And how might you get your brand in front of them during that time? That would be referred to as a brand touch point. And the experience with your brand, if they're evaluating the alternatives, what's it like? And then they're purchasing your product. How are they feeling about your brand at that point in time? Okay, is it all warm and fuzzy or cozy, I'm sorry. Are you making them search for that information? Is it confusing? We refer to a lot of friction, trying to find what's on your site, okay? So put yourself in your customer's mind. You want to build a customer-centric website. And that's what personas, empathy maps, customer journeys do. There are go on to Google and Google customer journey maps. There are excellent examples, tons. I mean, I just showed you one. There are tons of them. And they will show you, there are some businesses that make them very brief. There are others like the one I showed you that, as you can see down below, it showed you who should be responsible for each stage, okay? So once again, do your research, talk to people, and you know what? People really do want to talk to you. People really do want to give you their opinion, okay? So find some individuals who are likely customers for your business, and just maybe over a cup of coffee or over Zoom, talk to them. You'll be surprised how much they'll be willing to tell you. What are those pain points that they felt the last time they bought a product or service like what you're selling?
Yeah, thank you, Mary. I think one last bit is I distributed the handout that you have for everyone. And so if you'd like to just discuss a little bit about how our participants could use that in addition to today's lecture, that'd be really great.
Okay, sure. So this particular handout I have created and used a lot over time. And in fact, you're going to find that there's actually more information on the handout than what I was able to cover today. So it gives you an idea of different design conventions or patterns. It also it shows you what a sitemap would look like, what a wireframe would look like. It also talks a little bit about cascading style sheets. Now, once again, those are actually created for you through Weebly and Wix. So, but I gave you the HTML code just so you could see what you were dealing with. I also included some sources for fonts. If you want to look at some more interesting fonts than just the typical ones. So you've got some sources there. And I also spent some time talking about designing for global users, because I know some of your sites, you may have global users and you need to take into consideration some of their needs. And you will see I've given you some sources that you can go to as far as learning more about user experience and user interface and writing for the internet. So I think that's it.
All right, great. So thank you so much, Mary, for this really wonderful first session of your 3-part series. So as everyone can see here, throughout October, we'll continue with Mary in her next 2 webinars in this 3-part series on marketing. So each on the 14th and the 28th, we hope you'll join us again. And if you're really interested in learning a more deeper understanding of these specific topics, please also check out Maryland's MicroMasters program series, which do offer kind of longer and more in-depth sessions. Okay, so thank you everyone for attending. We'll see you again in the next webinar on October 14th. All right, thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.